Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Resistance Bureau, where my colleagues and I shine a light on the enduring struggles for freedom, the personal and collective campaigns against oppression, and the oft undercovered issues in Africa and worldwide that we believe merit broader attention. I am joined today by Kenyan politician Martha Karua, a former member of parliament and justice minister, and most recently, Raila Odinga's running mate in the 2022 presidential elections. She is head of the People's Liberation Party and founder of the Pan-African Progressive Leaders Solidarity Network, which advocates for social justice and pushes for the release of political prisoners. Since today's focus will be on East Africa's expanding authoritarian contagion, there are few people better placed to speak on these issues. So thank you for joining us, Martha, and for helping to educate our audience on these important matters.
Thank you for having me, and I'm ready.
Brilliant. Well, let's just jump right in. I know we have a lot to get to, particularly on the topic of East Africa, because in the next few months, it will be home to several elections in Burundi, Tanzania, and Uganda. In each of these countries, the main opposition leaders are either currently in jail, their parties barred from participating, and confronted with coordinated, often violent attacks from partisan authorities. In particular, you have noted that the case of Tundu Lissu, an old friend of mine, in Tanzania is emblematic of growing threats to democracy across Africa. Can you expand on this evaluation and explain what you meant by this?
If you look at Tanzania, the presidential elections are in October this year. They had the local authority elections November, December last year, and it would be fair to say, from the eyes of the opposition and many credible onlookers, they were a sham. The current government claimed to have won by 98%, which is an impossibility. Fast forward, Tundu Lissu, the main opposition candidate, the front runner against current President Samia, has galvanized members of his party to demand reforms before elections. Their mantra was no reform, no elections. And Tundu Lissu was arrested for addressing a rally where he urged the people not to go to elections without reforms. He was arrested and charged with treason, and he has been in custody since then. And the case is ongoing in court. The authorities in Tanzania were not satisfied incarcerating him on politically motivated charges. They also refused to produce him in court and demanded that he attends the proceedings virtually. I was in court that day alongside others as observers. His lawyers demanded he be brought to court. He himself boycotted the virtual session. The court ruled in favor of the state, but after international outcry, the court has reversed itself, and he is now going to be produced on the 19th of this month before the court in Dar es Salaam. We hope to be there to witness that. So you can see it's not only politically motivated charges, but denial of his rights. In the meantime, the opposition in Tanzania, his deputy, his secretary general, members of his party have been arrested, harassed. Some of them have broken limbs, and members of the public coming to attend the case have also been harassed. One of them actually died out of beatings by the police. These are very, very serious issues. On the neighboring side, Uganda, a key member state of the East African community, Dr. Kizza Besigye has been in custody together with his friend Obed Lutale since November last year, when they were abducted from Kenya, renditioned to Uganda, and charged before a military court. Even though the case now has moved from the military court to a civilian court, it is based on the same acts that the court found unconstitutional, and they have been kept behind bars. It's now going to 6 months since they were illegally incarcerated. 16th of this month will be 6 months since their arrest. we will be in court in Kampala on the 20th, 21st, when their case comes up for mention. In the neighboring Burundi, the CNL, the main opposition party, led by Honorable Agathon Rwasa, was wrestled from the hands of Rwasa sometime last year by members, a few disgruntled members, supported by the ruling party, by the state, and they became registered as the officials of the opposition party, depriving of Agathon Rwasa, his deputies, and their members around the country of a platform to participate in elections this year, clearly killing the opposition. You can see what is common in those three countries is, and I'll come to talk about Kenya because we are in the same boat. What is common in those three countries is that elections are nearing. Uganda general elections are in January next year. The opposition in Uganda is being haunted, not only Dr. Kizza Besigye, but Bobi Wine, who now heads the largest opposition party, his members, his supporters, and even himself and the party headquarters are under continuous surveillance and attack by the UPDF, not even by the regular police, by the army, whose commander-in-chief is President Museveni, who is himself a candidate in the same elections. So the pattern is for the incumbents to use their incumbency, to use the security forces and the justice system to be ahead and to declare themselves winners by killing the opposition. Fast forward in Kenya, the Gen Z protests of last year demanding accountability, transparency and accountability was stopped through use of force, deliberate shoot to kill, injuring of so many, and abductions now have become the order of the day. They continue. The justice system has not been able to defend the citizens so far against these abductions. They are ongoing. So you can see that in the Jumuiya, a majority of the leaders are seen working in cooperation, are using their incumbency to actually extinguish the fire of the opposition. I'll emphasize more on Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. They were leading in democratic tradition. What is happening in them is very significant. For the Jumuiya, instead of showing the way to younger states like South Sudan, like Somalia, like DRC Congo, we are now becoming masters in autocratic rule and reversal of democracy. That doesn't augur well for the Jumuiya. As citizens of the Jumuiya, we are coming together to push back. And that is why you see the various bar associations, the various civil society, individuals and organizations, Pan-African organizations, coming together to push back on this repression.
That's a brilliant breakdown of the dynamics currently taking place in the region. And it's so timely we're having this conversation now, particularly the fact that you mentioned the upcoming court cases next week, both in Uganda and Tanzania. And just today, you may have seen a deputy secretary general in Tanzania was of Chadema, the main opposition party, was arrested, Amani Golugwa. So it's never ending. You know, it's continuing even today. And you mentioned the abductions taking place in Kenya. So I wanted to home in a bit on that a bit, because it certainly appears that authorities there have been, at worst, aiding and abetting this regional repression that you've spoken so eloquently of, or at best, they've been complicit in it. Activists, of course, have raised concerns about the abductions in recent months, including of foreign nationals, the most notable of which was Maria Sahai from Tanzania, of course, Dr. Besigye last December. And, for me, looking at this, despite Kenya's many challenges over the years, activists from across the continent had always looked to Nairobi as a safe place to gather, to exchange ideas and to meet in safety without interference. Now that this is clearly no longer the case, what sort of chilling effect has this had on broader activism in Kenya and in the region, as well as opportunities for democratic solidarity, these very issues that you and your organization are currently working on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that just emphasizes the gravity of the matter. That Kenya, that was the remaining safe haven, has joined and become a rogue state and has joined other rogue states to make the Jumuiya or East Africa inhabitable to free-thinking people, to democracy. They are killing our democracy and our civic space. And it points out the urgency of resisting. And I'm glad that this podcast is about resisting. We really must resist autocracy. I keep saying in Kenya, Ruto, Dr. William Ruto, is in a hurry to graduate as a dictator. And I'm sure he is learning at the feet of those who have spent 40 years in office. And within 2 years, he wants to graduate. We must thwart that graduation. We must resist autocracy in Kenya. If Kenya falls to autocratic rule, that spells doom for East Africa. President Museveni, the days he was rooting for freedom in Uganda, Kenya was a safe haven. Tanzania was also a place he could go. In actual fact, Tanzania assisted him as he marched into Uganda. It is a shame that President Museveni, collaborating with Dr. William Ruto, can abduct Besigye from Nairobi, that they can unredition him to Uganda. Both Kenya and Uganda have constitutions that demand due process, have laws, extradition laws that demand anybody being taken out to another country for trial, whether a Kenyan or a foreign national, can only be taken through a court order. So you have to take someone to court where they have a right to resist their being extradited. This was not done. Besigye and Butale had their passports in their hotel in Nairobi. They were left behind. There were no travel papers issued, meaning they were trafficked at the border. There was no record of them being taken out. And that's very dangerous. That can lead to disappearance. So how else can you describe a state that not only abducts, but traffics individuals? And then you look at Tanzania, who had ordered the abduction of Maria Sarungi Shai. And why was she about to be renditioned to Tanzania from where she fled? We thank her for fighting, and we thank Kenyans on Twitter and on social media for helping her resist, and all the international voices. Some not on Twitter behind the scenes that got her release before she could be renditioned. Some nationals of Ethiopia have not been that lucky. They've been renditioned. Refugees from Turkey were renditioned last year. 36 Ugandans, members of Dr. Besigye's party, were renditioned in July from Kisumu. We can see that Kenya can easily be described as the abduction capital of East Africa. And we hear the president making statements, that's Dr. Ruto, implicitly admitting, one of which was yesterday or day before speech when he was talking with the Finnish president, where he said that the abductions will stop. This is a repeat statement and saying that it will not happen again under his watch. We know there are footprints which show its security forces abducted. We pay taxes not to murder Kenyans. We buy those weapons to protect Kenyans, to protect their lives and property, not to assault them. And we are saying to Kenya's partners, especially those who are assisting the East African countries, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and even Burundi, in matters of security. Are you comfortable with your taxpayers' money being used to sharpen these regimes in abducting and executing their nationals. We hear the loud silence of our friends, and we salute those who have come in and to the face asked the authorities, why are there abductions? Why is there abuse of human rights? It is very important that we have this conversation. And our duty as activists is to highlight the problem within our countries, within the East Africa region, and to the world, so that what is happening in Kenya can be known, and those who can help can help. And I want to mention that even in Kenya, I have appeared in court in a case filed by the Law Society of Kenya, asking for the production of abducted youth. Some of them were produced in court, some turned out dead, 2 of them Rolongo 4, 2 are still disappeared. We continue to question so that we highlight the wrong things happening within our country, in the region. And together as citizens of East Africa, we begin to take our destiny into our hands and to push back against dictatorship and authoritarianism and abuse of our rights.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think this is a good segue to my next question. Obviously, the picture you paint is a very dire outlook, not just for Kenya, but for the broader region. And we haven't even really gotten into some of the countries you've mentioned in brief: South Sudan and Eastern DR Congo, and then going up to the Horn, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, home to some of the longest ruling dictatorships on the continent. So I wanted to ask you, and I always like to try to end on a positive note, what is your outlook going forward in these next few months, and what can people in the affected countries you spoke about today do specifically to build that necessary strength to resist and to challenge these violent encroachments on democratic space? And what is your specific plan of action, especially now that you have announced plans to run for president in 2027?
Firstly, we must all use our agency to resist, and we must also stand in solidarity with each other as nationals within our nations, so that we raise our voices together, so that we cover each other and we become each other's keeper in these matters. And I know it helps when many people raise their voices together. The Law Society has used its agency. Various activists and various organizations have used their agency, and together we have also come individually, stood together. And I believe that pushback is helping and will eventually work wonders. The same, we must extend the solidarity beyond the borders. And that's what we are doing by going to Tanzania and Uganda. And I believe in coming days, you will see people from Uganda coming to Tanzania. Tanzanians have already come to Uganda when we are going to Dr. Besige's case. So we must rally ourselves internally and within the East African bloc. Also, our friends from other parts of Africa, we have a lawyer from Comoros who comes. We've had solidarity from lawyers from Luanda, Angola, and lawyers writing about what is happening from as far as Nigeria and South Africa. And we have had support from people as far as the US, the New York City Bar, the American Bar Association, the Commonwealth. This is a sort of solidarity that will work. How are we going to help this? One, by voting out these leaders. And the opposition in our respective countries needs to stand in solidarity. It's very hard to throw out serving dictators or authoritarian rulers. We need to come together so that we can have votes that will defeat any attempt to manipulate. I have offered myself as a candidate here in Kenya. There are many of my brothers in the opposition who have also offered themselves. We have agreed to stand together to place the need to liberate Kenya ahead of our personal ambitions. We are building structures of selecting unity candidates for all the 6 elections. And I have pledged to do my best to be that candidate. But in case I am not, then I would be willing to stand behind whoever is chosen, because Kenya is greater than me. How would a Martha Karua presidency do it differently? There would be rule of law, strict adherence, and when there is rule of law, then it means the country will be using its operational manual, which is the Constitution of Kenya. It spells out issues of governance. When you follow the rule of law, you cannot have security forces abusing the rights of the people. You will have them doing the right thing, defending the people. And those who go astray, they'll be taken through the justice system real time. You cannot, where there is rule of law, have people abusing public finances, stealing them or misapplying them. They will use them according to the operational manual, which is the Constitution and the laws made under it. So there will be proper governance, adherence to the rule of law, respect for human rights and other civic rights. And the priorities of the people, not the comfort of the ruling elite, will be the first charges on the taxes we collect. Right now, we are having 2.5 billion for renovating Dr. William Ruto's office, when the country has been unable to pay 1.6 billion for vaccines for children. That is priorities upside down. That is fiscal indiscipline. The state is not for pampering the comfort of a few, but for ministering to the necessities of the majority. That's just to say in a nutshell that people would come first, their rights would be respected, and it would be a just economy that works for everybody, not for a few. We would ensure that people are not overtaxed to the extent that they cannot put food on the table, and whatever taxes people pay would be commensurate with the services they are getting. Right. We would ensure debt is only procured in accordance with the law and applied strictly in accordance with the law. You cannot take debt for recurrent expenditure or have debt on the books, yet it never came to the consolidated fund. It was shared somewhere out without coming to Kenya. So we would also have an audit of the debts and tracing of where the funds went. Yeah. A government that operates like a going concern, not anything goes. Yes.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to hear you say the work being done on the ground by you and your colleagues to unite the pro-democracy opposition in Kenya, because so often in my experience, the death knell of pro-democracy movements has been that inability to put country over self, right? And in the instances in which that has happened, I think back to some of the most hardened authoritarian environments, Gambia. Back in December 2016, what happened when Yahya Jammeh was voted out was the opposition coming together and elevating one candidate, putting country above self. The same thing in Zambia when then President Edgar Lungu was defeated. The same thing in Malawi when then President Peter Mutharika was defeated. It was the opposition coming together and united under a common umbrella. So I'm really glad to hear you speak about that and those efforts underway.
Senegal.
Yes,
Senegal,
exactly.
Country coming together. Country was already together under Pasteur. But Sonko, on coming out of jail, he was already barred from running. Right. He put country above self, gave his Secretary General, who is now President, Jumai Faye, and campaigned for him. He put country above self, and that's how Senegal came to have a new regime. I just wanted to add that. Absolutely. And by the way, our Solidarity Network was part of the groups that rooted for Senegal to have elections on time. And we went to observe, and we are very proud of having participated in that.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. And wow, you've definitely given us and you've given me a lot to think about. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time today and for taking a moment to speak with me on these important, critically important issues, these timely issues. I can speak on behalf of my entire team at the Resistance Bureau to say that we appreciate all that you've been doing to foster democratic solidarity, as well as your ongoing work to liberate pro-democracy leaders across the region. I wish you continued strength, and I really look forward to future conversations with you on these topics and so much more. So take good care in the meantime, and definitely stay safe. And we'll be watching from afar.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for what you do.